Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins Katan. We have a lot to talk about in the news this evening. One, even though President Bashar al-Assad from Syria has now left the country, now we have Russia that had two bases there, two military bases, needs to make a decision on what they're going to do. So we have that to cover. Also, Taiwan. Taiwan is developing their military, actually combining a couple missiles into one hypersonic that they would like to use against China, which China is not going to be too pleased to hear that. So these stories and quite a few more. But first we're going to start out about talking about the bird flu. Now, bird flu continues to stay in the news. Most recently, the Centers for Disease Control reported there was a mutation of the bird flu virus in an already seriously ill patient in the United States. Now, there are concerns this will make the disease more easily spread. While there have been no other reported transmissions, the CDC maintains that the general public is at low risk from contracting the virus.
Well, ABC medical contributor John Brownstein, a PhD, told ABC News, quote, "The CDC found this version of the virus had additional mutations and that had attached to the upper airway cells more easily," now hinting at a better ability to infect people. That being said, this was only found in the individual that was sick, and there's no reason to believe that this version of the virus is spread more broadly, end quote, concluded Brownstein.
Well, the CDC confirms the low risk with approximately 65 reported cases of bird flu in people for the year 2024. Now, they are monitoring over 10,000 exposures, but so far have only tested 530 of those 10,000. Now, according to Dr. Deborah Birx, a former White House COVID-19 response coordinator, she said, quote, "That means we're not testing enough, and we know from other viruses that a lot of the spread can be asymptomatic." In other words, they're not going to show any signs.
That's right. So, for now, experts say the major risk is to animals. Well, just this week, Northwest Naturals voluntarily recalled a batch of its frozen raw pet food after the death of a house cat. The cat's food was tested and the virus was found to be in it. Mr. Brownstein believes because we have yet to see any person-to-person transmissions, that's a great sign that we have the virus under control. However, officials in California have just issued a state of emergency because of the bird flu at dairy farms there.
Well, Israel TV 7 reported that Iran's Yemen proxy launched dozens of projectiles at Israel. Now, the attack destroyed an elementary school in Ramat Gan. Israeli Air Force have led 2 attacks by air on strategic Houthi targets in Yemen. Now, the Houthis launched more attacks with UAVs on civilian areas in Israel, and some were successfully intercepted by a U.S.-led naval operation called Prosperity Guardian, while the rest were intercepted and destroyed by Israeli Navy and aerial defenses.
Well, in response to the attacks, sirens sounded through much of central Israel as a ballistic missile was launched toward the city of Tel Aviv. Israel's Arrow 3 missiles were launched and successfully shot down the incoming missile outside the atmosphere, but debris from the missile landed in Ramat Gan, severely damaging that elementary school we mentioned earlier.
Must be fairly large missiles if just the debris could severely damage a school.
Yeah.
Well, with Bashar al-Assad fleeing Syria, Russia has to rethink its military strategies. Now, it has 2 military bases in Syria along the Mediterranean Sea. Russia says it is working with the new leaders of Syria to see if they will allow the bases to remain operational. But Moscow is also considering Libya as a possible new home base. Now, in our first video, Palki Sharma takes a look at Russia's dilemma on Vantage. Take a look.
Now let's look at the situation in Syria. But our focus today is on a foreign player in Syria, that's Russia. Russia was an ally of Bashar al-Assad, Syria's ousted dictator. Moscow helped Assad stay in power for years. They supported him with air power to help drive the rebels back. But now the Syrian rebels have won. And this puts Russia in an awkward situation. For many, Moscow is an enemy. That being said, Russia isn't a country to be trifled with. They have a strong military presence in Syria in the form of two bases. There's the Hmeimim Air Base near the city of Latakia. This is the base that Assad fled from. This is where he boarded his flight to Moscow. Russia also has a naval base in Syria in the city of Tartus. This is Russia's only naval base in the Mediterranean Sea. They built the Tartus base back in 1971, more than 50 years ago. The Hmeimim base is newer. It was built in 2015. Now, both bases are an integral part of Russia's military strategy. They help Moscow project power overseas. They're used to resupply Russian forces abroad, like the mercenaries currently operating in Africa. So the Syrian bases are crucial for Moscow, but their future is uncertain. This is what the Kremlin said when asked about the bases.
There are no final decisions on this issue at the current moment. We have contacts with representatives of those in control of the situation in the country now, and everything will be settled through dialogue.
Russia says it is in talks with the new rulers of Syria. They're trying to work out a deal to keep the bases operational. But it's not a done deal yet. And they're working on a backup plan in case they're forced to abandon the Syrian bases. The Russians have started moving out some equipment. There are satellite images of the action. They show Antonov AN-124s being loaded. These are the world's largest cargo planes. They're being packed with Russian equipment and being flown back to Russia. These planes are also carrying diplomats from Russia and also from allied countries like Belarus and North Korea. But not all the cargo planes were headed home. Some of them took a different route. They landed up in the North African nation of Libya. 2 aircraft were spotted making trips to a Libyan air base. These are the Ilyushin 76TD. These aircraft landed in the Al Khadim base near the city of Benghazi. These planes were presumably carrying Russian military equipment, which raises the question, is Russia relocating its military assets? Is it shifting base from Syria to Libya? And why Libya? Let's look at the situation in Libya first. It's a mess. This country has been in crisis for more than a decade, since 2011, in fact, when its leader and dictator Muammar Gaddafi was assassinated. Libya has been divided since then. It is currently controlled by 2 governments. One is based in the capital, Tripoli. This is the government that is recognized by the United Nations. This is the first government. The second government is based in Benghazi. This one is backed by an armed group called the Libyan National Army. It is led by Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar. So Haftar is the power behind the Benghazi-based regime, and Moscow has been supporting him for years. In return, Haftar has allowed Russia to build up its military presence in Libya. As of today, Russia controls multiple bases in Libya, 4 air bases and 1 port. All of them are in areas controlled by Khalifa Haftar.
Well, it appears that Russia is still trying to definitely keep some type of footing in that region. Well, in a surprising move, Ukraine decides to shut off Russian gas from entering pipelines into its country and onto other parts of Europe. But how will this affect everyone, including Russia? Well, please take a look at the next video to find out.
Ukraine has shut off the Russian gas tap, that too in the middle of winter. They had a 5-year transit deal with Moscow, a deal that expired by the end of 2024. Kiev had the option of extending the deal last month, but Volodymyr Zelensky said no. He said Russian gas would not be allowed to flow via Ukrainian land. It's a decision that affects all sides. Russia loses money in gas sales, Europe loses energy supplies, and Ukraine loses transit fees. So the question is, who is the bigger loser? First, some facts. Russia has long been the dominant gas supplier to Europe. You have pipelines connecting the two sides. There are pipelines over Ukraine, over Belarus, over the Baltic Sea, and over Turkey. The ones over Ukraine are the most important. Russia has been using them since 1991. Even after the war began, the war in Ukraine, Russian gas flowed through Ukraine. It's a deal that worked for both sides. Ukraine got around $800 million in annual fees, and Russia got a short route to Europe. But Zelensky says no more. He has given up the transit fees to end Russian supplies. And what's the fallout? Well, limited so far. European energy prices are only marginally up. And this is very different from the shock of 2022. Do you know why? Because this time Europe is prepared. In 2021, Russia made up 40% of Europe's gas imports. By 2023, their share had fallen to 8%, which means Europe has diversified. They are buying more gas from other places, from the US and Qatar. Hence the limited impact. But some countries in Eastern Europe will be worried, especially Slovakia. Around 1/3 of their gas comes from Russia. So their prime minister is furious. His name is Robert Fico. He visited Moscow last week and met President Putin. And today he lashed out at Ukraine. He said the move would hurt Europe, not Russia.
The grass always suffers. I do not want Slovakia to be such grass, as we see these days when the transit of gas through Ukraine is stopped, which will have drastic impacts on all of us in the European Union, but not on the Russian Federation.
Putin said the same thing last month. He said Russia is always willing to supply gas, but that Ukraine is politicizing the issue.
We did not terminate the contract. They said that would not extend it. If that's what they want, so be it. They are hand-fed by Europe. Because, like I said, without European support, Ukraine not only is not able to battle, but cannot exist in general. And now, Ukraine punishes Europe by shutting down the transit contracts.
Katan, it seems as if Ukraine is trying to hurt Russia. It doesn't seem Russia is going to be too affected or even concerned because they have alternative routes, and it looks like they're going to, they're hurting themselves. Ukraine is going to hurt themselves, and even Europe, some of which are supporting them more than it's going to even affect Russia.
Yeah, and this has been a hot topic for a long period of time. Remember, we talked some time ago about the Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2 pipeline, with that essential transfer of gas to those regions. Well, there's a lot at stake if that's shut off. But like Russia said, it's not really worried about it because it still has gas to supply its own country.
Well, the U.S. is joining the ranks of countries with their latest missile tests. Now, this test intercepted a medium-range ballistic missile that was fired off the coast of Guam. Their goal is to further develop the air defense program in that region. Now, the test, called Flight Experiment Missile, or FEM-02, utilized a standard missile that was equipped with a new TPY radar and vertical launching system. Now, the missile hit its target, which was an intermediate range ballistic missile launched from the Anderson Air Force Base in Guam.
The U.S. Missile Defense Agency called the test a success as it continues to strengthen the island's defense against building threats in the region. Now, Guam is a strategic military location for the United States as it is located close to China, and its purpose is to defend against growing adversities in the Western Pacific region.
Well, Taiwan has hypersonic missiles that are capable of striking China's capital, Beijing. Now, China's president said in a statement, quote, "No one can stop China's unification with Taiwan." Beijing has also made it clear that China will invade Taiwan in 2027, no matter what the stakes are. With Taiwan's military budget of $411 million US dollars, they have developed and modified 2 missiles into one to create this new hypersonic missile, which is now in mass production and being delivered to the Taiwanese military. This is the first time that the Taiwanese have possessed such a weapon.
Well, across the South China Sea, President Xi's remarks about China's reunification with Taiwan was met with a rebuttal from Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te at a, of course, New Year's Day address. Now, Ching-te spoke about protecting democracy and said that Taiwan must be prepared for danger in times of peace. He also said, quote, being friends with the world through democracy is the only way to resume or ensure stability and peace. The safer Taiwan is, the safer the world will be. The stronger Taiwan is, the more solid the world's democratic defense line would be.
Well, he also added that democracy should unite to resolve the conflicts between Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Gaza and safeguard the security of the Taiwan Strait and Indo-Pacific.
Well, this next video shows Israel's proposed move to open an embassy in Moldova. What do the experts think about this move? Is it to extend its political olive branch or swing a political sword to cut off those with differing views? Well, let's take a look at this next video for more.
So Israel is now saying, though, it wants to open an embassy in Moldova, instead saying it has friendlier relations than with Ireland. So what does that signal to you? And does it merely wish to have relations with countries that agree with it politically?
Well, yeah, there's an argument that says that what Israel is doing is weaponizing diplomacy, as if weaponizing diplomacy hasn't existed is as old as diplomacy itself. It's always been weaponized. The U.S. does it, Russia does it, Britain does it, China does it, everyone's doing it. So in that respect, announcing that we're shutting down, that Israel is shutting down the operation, the embassy in Ireland, but opening one in Moldova is part of that grandstanding that I referred to earlier. But here's the thing, Dorit. I have nothing sympathetic to say about Irish policies. I condemn and criticize my government 24 hours, 7 days a week. But that's not the point. The point is, how do you conduct diplomatic relations? If you shut down embassies in countries that you disagree with, then most countries will not have, with the exception of perhaps Switzerland and one other, most countries will shut down half the embassies of half the world. That is an anathema to diplomacy, which is why I think this move is silly. You need to engage the Irish. You need to engage the 2 other guests on this panel and explain to them why you think they are wrong, where you think they are right, and what is the common ground. Shutting down an embassy, that's a silly, stupid, counterproductive move.
Oh, okay, well, Alan, that is the headline right now, but behind closed doors, and as a former diplomat yourself, do you think that there are more sort of measured conversations taking place right now behind closed doors? What could be going on?
What, you mean where? In the Israeli government?
Right.
No. Assumption, most specifically by a new foreign minister who left Netanyahu's party 5 years ago and now returned as some kind of a submissive handsmaid and wants to prove his worth and his new loyalty to the Pope. So he's trying to prove to Netanyahu that he's just as Catholic, to borrow the expression from the Irish. He's just as Catholic as he is.
Katan, that seems like a classic case of just go ahead and pull away and hopefully the problem will go away instead of working it out peacefully.
Well, that seems to be how Israel kind of manages their difficulties, is, acts of war instead of bringing about actual peace.
Right. If you don't agree with us, tough. Well, Israel continues its missile bombardment in Syria, targeting what it calls military strikes even after the Assad regime has fallen. Now, for more information on why the attacks continue, take a look at this following video.
Israel has launched several attacks inside Syria, insisting threats posed by the country remain significant. These are the latest images of an airstrike near the northern coastal city of Tartus. The Israeli army says it's targeting what it says are military sites. Israel has hit Syria with more than 500 airstrikes since the Assad regime was toppled last week. Let's cross over to Rasul Sadr, joins us now live from Damascus. Just bring us up to speed on what we think is going on with these Israeli strikes overnight and the situation this morning.
Well, Suhail, 8 days after the fall of the Assad regime, Israeli air forces are still pounding Syria. And last night we have seen that there have been 2 attacks in and around Damascus, particularly right around the Qasim mountain, which is not far away from where we are. Indeed, just kilometers on the opposite directions where we are looking now. And we have seen that they are destroying the air defense systems and also the radar systems as well. These are the air defense systems that were set up to protect the skies of the capital city against any kind of missiles or any attack conducted by the aircrafts. And then Israelis have hit the coastal city of Tartus. It's important because Tartus is the hometown that is hosting the real Russian naval bases over there. And also Tartus and then the Latakia, these areas particularly, is where the Syrian naval forces are also stationed. And it was regarded as the old regime's stronghold, then the city of Hama as well. But the explosion in Tartus was extremely loud, and based on the observations, some of the experts are saying that that might probably be in a chemical weapon production house. And that's why both the explosions of the Israelis and that depots all together has created such a huge magnitude of an explosion. And that, by the way, it's ongoing, 8 days on, just hours after the fall of Assad regime. Israel started to hit the strategic military facilities, but particularly air defense systems and the air forces. And having done that, so Israel is pursuing a strategy of diminishing this country's air defense capability and also air forces.
Yes, so, a lot of people were wondering if Israel was going to continue those attacks in Syria after the Assad regime fell. Well, like the guy said, just a mere few days afterwards, 8 days, they were right again hitting what they said were, strategic targets that were housing weaponry and so forth. And of course, again, it's the people in these regions that are suffering the most, the brunt of this. A lot of people were looking to get back and kind of start rebuilding their lives, but Israel is still dropping bombs on a lot of places, so it makes it very difficult for people to kind of resume some sort of normalcy.
Right, and Israel, of course, they're thinking, well, we don't want all this weapons that are left there in Syria to fall in the wrong hands, because it seems like everybody is against Israel. Sure. But as you said, it makes it difficult for the people who do want to get back to some type of normalcy, if that's ever going to be such a thing. Yeah. It prevents them from doing so because of this continual bombardment.
Yeah, and the moves that Israel is making and has made for a long period of time, it's not really doing anything to garner them more friends or more allies. It's really just creating more enemies in the region and abroad.
Right, dividing the region.
That's right. Well, if you'd like to know more about what's taking place in the nations and actually how it is prophesied to end, contact the House of Yahweh. And when you contact the House of Yahweh, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them at any of their websites by going to yahweh.com, yisraelhawkins.com, or yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to ypnnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@yahweh.com. For any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And once again, don't forget to go to Yisrael Says to check out the Yisrael Says program and Ask Yisrael program by going to askyisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Grab your scriptures, some paper, and something to write with, because up next is another classic sermon by Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.